Well, here we go.
Yeah. So the album's been out for less than a month now. How has the response been so far?
It's been really strong and overwhelmingly positive, which is awesome. The more music I make and release, the less and less I comment dive. So I'm doing it in in moderation.
Yeah.
But from my vantage, and I think the rest of the guys and everybody sort of in our orbit, everyone's feeling like you know, feeling the love. It's really strong and very, very positive reception. So yeah, it's great. Kind of an interesting approach. Like we took a little bit of a different kind of run up to the release this time by touring into its release. And then now we've got a little time off before we actually get going with the tour cycle a little bit later. So it's kind of a strange, like, the record's out and we put all the work in and not being on tour makes me kind of like feel slightly inert at the moment, but there's lots coming, so I'm just like letting it settle in for everybody and we're being patient on that. But we worked really hard for a long time on this one, so it's nice to have time off. So
Yeah, I bet. Well, and you guys tour a lot. I mean, you guys are on the road a lot.
yeah.
You're a very hardworking band.
Yeah.
And so, with that, when you do have time off, what are some of the things you do to kind of rejuvenate yourself or try to like balance out that tour life with regular life?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been playing a little less, which is by design. Just because I find that I always love it more when I have that break and I come back to it. It reminds me like why I'm so into the instrument and music and all that stuff. So that's kind of where I've been, for the last little bit. However, there's some stuff on the calendar that is keeping a guitar in my lap. So it's not that I'm not playing, it's just maybe a little less than when I'm obsessing over the record. But yeah, just generally trying to get out of the house and just like be on my feet and go for some long walks, taking some podcasts, get caught up on some media and some things like that that I haven't been able to maybe do as much. Get back in the gym, been getting tattooed, which is kind of a fun thing that I waited a really long time to do. And now I'm enjoying having time off and having some fun with that. So that's cool. And yeah, popping in and out of the city. We've been living out of town I'm from Toronto, born and raised. And, the vast majority of the intervals activity over the last decade plus has been kind of based out of Toronto. And my partner got her degree from Queen's University, and we moved out of town to a small Ontario town, and like it's been really cool. And I'm enjoying like the last of our time here this summer, and just kind of like generally getting out and being in a place that's a little bit more calm and relaxed before we move back to Toronto at the end of the summer and stuff like that. So that's kind of what's up right now, is just enjoying the downtime. But at the same time, getting ready to head to Asia in July for a series of clinics on a clinic tour on behalf of Schecter with Nick Johnson. We're just getting ready to roll that out. So I'm preparing for that and getting caught up on guest solos and things like that. So still doing some playing, of course, but lower stakes. So it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the tattoo on your forearm, that's a new one.
Oh yeah, and I've been punishing my legs as well.
Have you? So
It's a
are
good
you sleeping?
it's a good time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't keep you from sleeping.
The first few I had to kind of figure it out. I got tattooed for the first time on tour. So
Oh my
if
gosh.
you can figure out how to heal a tattoo on a tour bus, then you're pretty much, I mean, yeah, I don't the bed isn't moving uh, when I'm at home. So, but no, it's been cool. I'm certainly enjoying it. I'm have a strange threshold for pain, so I'm like, whatever, let's just do it.
What's been your favorite one that you've gotten so far?
I am enjoying this raven with a
It's
scythe
really
and
cool.
the skull. The legs are getting punched. Legs are
Oh man.
so
Oh, that's pretty.
a bunch of cool stuff on there. Yeah. I can't pick any favorites. Just like don't ask me my favorite song or my favorite album. It's just you're not gonna get an answer. I can't pick favorites. I'm
Yeah,
like
you'll
they're all my children.
Right, right. Well, and that's how I am too. Anytime, because I love music so much. Anytime someone asks me to pick, yeah, a favorite song, I can always go to my go-to, even though it might not necessarily ring true anymore. Um, but albums, I'm like, ask me again in 5 minutes and it'll change.
Yeah, I'm the same way, especially about my own music and stuff. And I do get asked often, like, what are you listening to right now? Or like, what's your, favorite thing right now? It's like, I don't know. I'm just whatever was last on my Spotify is like whatever I'm feeling right now. I'm just into whether it's visual art or music or whatever. Like I'm constantly learning new things. And I was actually having a conversation with my girlfriend this morning about like I tend to, when I develop find a new hobby or a passion or something, like I'm just like with guitar, like I get really into stuff. So, I have a lot of friends that have tattooed for a long time and I'm like really into, you know, the visual art side of things. I have a major appreciation for that because, that sort of dovetails with what I do when it comes time to develop an album concept or aesthetic, which I just spent last year working on probably the most ambitious um artwork and layout that we've ever had. You know, even independent of all the video work and everything. So like I really love that. And I'm not visually artistically inclined at all. Music is definitely my thing. I can barely write my name. So it's like, I have a major respect for that and learning about like the history of, traditional tattoos and flash and all that stuff has been like really fascinating to me. So yeah, a little time off and a little bit of distraction and because I'll just go down the rabbit hole like all of last year. Although thankfully last year was broken up by tours in the midst of recording, which is also something that we've kind of never really done before. Usually we'll go away, have a bunch of time off, sort of like make a record and then release it sort of in a vacuum and then go out and tour and get a vibe check afterwards. But we started the record and then um went on tour with After the Burial and Spiritbox, and we did that all last spring. And then came home, finished composing. There was still more writing to do. So, got a nice inspirational break by going on tour. Being on tour always inspires me because we're touring with different artists and I get to hang out with like all my friends and see what they're up to. And that always has an impact on stuff. So came home, did some more writing, got back in the studio. Then we went on tour with Tesseract. Um, and then, got to start rolling out the record. So definitely like a different approach there and got to break the year up by oscillating between the road and studio, which we've never really done before. So now that that stuff's off my plate, I'm like, okay, what else am I going to sink my brain into, but it's been cool. Time off is nice. And like, summer is, you want to enjoy the summer where I'm at because the rest of the year is just like cold, treacherous and miserable. So it's like, this is the time to be here and hang out and, do all that stuff. So it's cool.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, there's a lot of different things I wanna jump on throughout all of that.
Yeah.
Memory Palace obviously is a very full album. There's so many different soundscapes, there's so many different layers. Do you feel like because of how you recorded it and being around different bands and different sorry, my dog is like freaking out in the background. I don't know if you can hear
Okay.
him.
No,
He's
it can't.
like
You're
crying
good.
in the background. Um, but do you feel like being around especially such different artists, like Tesseract and Spiritbox are obviously very different ends of the spectrum, do you feel like that helps with the inspiration and the influence to add so many layers to Memory Palace?
Yeah, I mean, for me, inspiration is more so about like intention. Like when I listen to, another artist, it's not, with that lens, so to speak. It's not necessarily about like um
An
the
influence type
the
thing.
the micro details. Like they're there, and of course I'm paying attention. It's more so the macro like delivery of like what the intention is of like how a song functions, its overall duration, the choices made within that, as far as its flow, like how it makes you feel, these types of things, because that matters a lot to me because I think in contemporary instrumental guitar forward music, there's a lot of tropes that I think a lot of us have done a good job at dispelling over the last, maybe 6 to 7, 8 years. I'm sort of referencing that time period because I truly believe like modern guitar music took a step forward after about, maybe about 2012, 2013 is when it really kind of started to evolve from this like preconception that it's like a self-indulgent corner of like rock and metal where like guys who know how to play too many notes are just doing it for themselves or whatever. And like to a degree, I think that maybe there was some early music in the gap between like when it was in its heyday. That would be like, the like 80s into the 90s. And then like, that was like the Sunset Strip, like LA Shrapnel Records shredder era that kind of like it gave way to the goats, of course, like Steve Vai, Paul Gilbert, Satriani, all these types of incredible players. But it sort of like died a small death in the 90s where like it became uncool. Like it was way cooler to wear like tattered jeans and a flannel and play Smells Like Teen Spirit, which like 100% that was like the vibe at the time, and that makes sense, culturally for the music and like what sort of what was happening within the like rock and alternative music community at the time. Totally makes sense. And these things come and go in waves. If we're leaning into too much, then the answer from the community is to go minimalistic and maybe go like, let's be rougher around the edges. And so we had that for a while. And then guitar music became this sort of obscure thing of the past. Like, are we going to see it again? Does it matter? You were getting less and less guitar in contemporary music, which often I feel like, you know, funny enough, we were just on tour with Mammoth WVH, and I was talking to Wolfie about, you know, just I mean, talking about a lot of things, but I remember speaking to him about, I don't even remember how it came up, but he gave me some anecdotes about what his dad recorded when Eddie recorded the guitar solo for Beat It. And
Mhm.
that makes me think about like guitar in contemporary music, and and that does exist to a degree. Can't remember what song it is. There's a Weekend song from like a little while back that had a guitar solo on it and stuff. And it's like the guitar always it functions like a caricature of itself in contemporary music, where it's like I don't know if it's really serving the purpose, like to like allow it to take a step forward in the like
Enrich
contemporary
the
music.
song.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
or even just like promoting guitar within the zeitgeist of like mainstream music.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas now, though, you're definitely seeing, I mean, it's obviously way more in our space, but you look at like the latest Bring Me the Horizon record, and of course they're a guitar driven band, but like you're hearing the same type of guitar approach in some songs that's like happening in contemporary pop and hip hop. This like cleaner, like emo throwback kind of guitar that's like really taken off in the mainstream. It's just nice to see it all like blending together. And now it's like, okay, that's where we are now. But in, 2009 through 13 or 14, like the front runner would have been Animals as Leaders,
Yeah.
kicking the door down ahead of like the new school.
Mhm.
And the first Intervals EP came out in 2010. So I was doing it then as well, but like it was different, I still wasn't necessarily all the way in on whether or not the project would stay instrumental, hence a 2014 record that features a vocalist. I was still trying things, but it's cool to see how much it's evolved. There's not a lot of us, but the ones that are doing it and doing it on the road and doing it consistently have all sort of, staked our claim. And for me, and this to bring it back to your initial question, like going on tour with contemporary bands like Spiritbox or Tesseract, a little bit more in our wheelhouse, of course, Um, but being able to step out and do things that are different. We just did a tour with Mammoth WVH. That's definitely like while it intersects in some capacity, we were certainly a new phenomenon for a lot of people in the audience. I'd say.
Mhm.
Um, it's just really cool to like keep an eye on that stuff because I think modern instrumental guitar music benefits from having the thumb on the pulse of like what's happening in mainstream music, which gives it more of a fighting chance to become relatable. I think
Yeah.
to the average listener that might be like, oh, guitar music, like it's not for me, or like, oh,
Right.
like my nerdy cousin who plays guitar goes to those shows or whatever. It's not my thing or whatever. I think that that's changing a lot. Um, and yeah, I'm not like whole hog just jacking, vibes straight from, oh, we went on tour Spirit Box. So like I'm gonna like
Of
here's
course
the thing.
not. You're
But
way
it's
too creative for that.
well, inspiration is the and imitation are certainly like the biggest forms of flattery, more
Sure, of
so
course.
imitation, of course, but being inspired by another artist and conveying that through your music is important, you know.
Yeah.
So I would be lying if I didn't say I, you know, came home and didn't write, you know, songs like Circuit Bender or Neurogenesis, which didn't exist prior to that tour, and not be like, okay, yeah, there's definitely like, you
Some
know, my
influence
eye on the
there.
prize there. Yeah, for sure. So that happens, but got to do it in a way that makes sense to our core listeners as well. And you know, fans of instrumental music are open minded. And funny enough, I'm actually finding that fans of more mainstream music, especially if your delivery is correct. We just also
Yeah.
did. I shouldn't breeze past this as well. We just spent 5 weeks doing a co-headliner across North America with Hail the Sun as well, which is totally a different sound as well. And what I found was that listeners in the audience, you know, that maybe weren't familiar with us or have heard of us but never seen us, are actually way more receptive than maybe fans solely of instrumental music in the other direction. Like, oh, you know, this band's not for me. I don't, you know, dig this particular sound or what's going on with vocals, lyrics, whatever. I found in most cases that listeners of mainstream music, especially if you present instrumental music with a really strong foot forward, you actually get a really quality reception, and people are like, no, this does bang. Like, I am into this. Like, I want more of this. Oh, you're not going to yell at me for 40 minutes? Like, I'm in. Like, you know what I mean? So some people really are receptive to that. And I think just, yeah, bringing those influences in and amalgamating that with, of course, not losing sight of what gets the core audience for us excited and us as well. Like, I am making
Course.
guitar forward music at the end of the day. So that's a pretty
Right.
long response, but hopefully that like kind of encompasses like, you know, yeah, the thought process there and being able to like, I think it's cool. We can hang in most situations, put us on tour with a bunch of bands, whoever it is. I think we're going to be able to tailor the set and deliver to the audience in a way that is endearing to them. And like,
Mhm.
I think that's only good for us all, you know, rising tide raises all ships. So like I said, there's not a lot of us doing instrumental music, but if we can all sort of branch in these different directions and bring new people into the fold, it only gets better, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, yeah, people that, like you said, initially would be like guitar music or instrumental music's not for me. They're recognizing and realizing that it's probably not how they envisioned it. You know, it's a lot more entertaining and enjoyable than even the average listener that isn't necessarily really into listening to instruments or into what the instruments are doing. Polyphia sold out here last year,
yep.
and I was shocked because I love instrumental music. I've seen Animals as Leaders. I've obviously Polyphia. I missed you guys when you guys were here because I was out of town, which I was so bummed because I really
Oh
really
no,
wanted to go to that show.
it's okay.
But yeah, I was surprised because I was like, because I had no idea that gap was being bridged so
Yeah,
graciously, you know? So I love
definitely.
it. I think it's so great that people are um becoming bigger fans because it is, you guys obviously put so much time and effort into what you do and you're all so incredibly talented. So it's good to see the I don't know, I don't know if average listener is a fair way of saying it, but I feel like that's, I don't know, polite. But the people that again aren't like super into
Yeah,
watching and picking apart instruments, it's cool to
sure.
see be able to entertain them as well.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think, like I said, it comes back to delivery. I think that, like, maybe if you show someone off the street animals as leaders with no context, they might be a little, you know, like, okay, there's a lot to think about here. I don't know if this is for me. Whereas, you know, Polyphia deserve all the respect for their intent. Again, it's intention, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily about like, well, let's just, you know, play these, you know, complex parts or do it in the way that they do it solely to satisfy only the guitar market. There's a deliberate um shift towards, and you can look at that over, you know, even just their approach from when they started until now. There was obviously during, you know, the years of, I think, probably 2019 through, you know, when the pandemic ended, I suppose there was a shift in the marketing approach, which is to let's pull in new fans, probably via TikTok or other mediums to basically, you know, show um to sort of present it in a different way, and their aesthetic and the way they're delivering the music definitely functions in that capacity. So it's like, that's kind of both sides of the pendulum. Not to put animals on the other side of the spectrum. I mean, we all do so definitely coexist. You could put us all on the same bill, and we've all
Yeah, but it is very different ways of how you guys all do it. I mean, you
different.
you could put all three of those bands in the same playlist and you're gonna know, if even if
Yeah,
you've never like listened to each and every song, you're gonna know which band is doing what song because you guys do it all so differently.
definitely a unique sort of sonic fingerprint for everybody. Yeah, and some
Yeah,
people, like I said, that's why I use the example about animals, like being like, if that's your first impression, it might be a little cerebral for some people,
right.
whereas the more recent Polyphia music functions in a way that's like it's as heady as you want it to be. Like you can zoom in on those parts, and if you know about guitar, then you go, wow, that's very technical. But there's a really strong pocket there. It's something to always bob your head to. They're less concerned with trying to like, crunch the math.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and I find that we fall somewhere in the middle where like we
Yep.
certainly have parts that make you think. There's basically an entire composition on this new record that is in, yeah, I've been seeing it just in comments and stuff, people trying to figure out like what time signature is this? Like, and we do that in a way that where I feel like we're presenting it in a trying to draw a straight line through maybe more complex ideas. Other times I'm just trying to give you straight goods. Like the idea is to present like a really strong identity that's like full of earworms that allows the guitar to function in a way like like a top line vocal would. And we oscillate between we swing the pendulum in both of those
Mm-hmm.
directions, and that's where I'm trying to find that middle ground where you could pick one song from my catalog and you might get that initial sort of impression like, oh, this is like a lot, and then you could pick some other tunes where it's like, oh wow, it's easy to digest. I think I understand what's going on here. And wow, the guitar is like telling me, what the song wants me to feel, which is much like the function of you know, a main vocal or something like that. So yeah, just trying to always kind of live in the middle there. But I think it's all great no matter what. And it's been amazing to see like the reception to this music in the live domain, especially post pandemic, has just been so awesome, and we've done a lot of North American touring. We're about to roll out a bunch more international stuff as sort of priority for the top of the touring cycle for this new album, which is cool. Gotta always remind America that it's not the center of the universe sometimes.
Totally.
So we're gonna go do that stuff first, and there's some announcements coming on that
Nice.
front. And those places have always been exceptionally, receptive to this kind of music. I think not that I'm describing us with this adjective, but the virtuosic nature of this kind of music is actually very highly respected in a lot of countries across Southeast Asia, and other various places where that part really matters to them, um, which I think is which is excellent. It's cool, and they're the sweetest people, and it's so nice to go and play in different places and for people of different cultures and stuff. Like
Yeah.
we got to do a lot of it right before the pandemic. Can't wait to do more. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. You also have kind of like in this one, like a video game kind
yeah,
of aspect to it,
definitely.
which is funny for me to pick out because I haven't played video games since Mario. Like I'm
All
not a
right.
gamer.
Well, if it's that obvious, then I guess we're getting the point across.
No, for sure. Well, it's there's some bands that try it and don't do it well, and there's some bands that try it and do it well, and then there's other bands that it just fits. And with
Yeah,
this album, it totally just fits. I mean, it's that added extra layer that I think does also bridge that gap for people who are gamers. They're like, oh, they can play games to it because it enriches their experience.
definitely, definitely. Or sick drive or like
Yes.
streaming or whatever. Like because just a solid. Whether it's gym music or something to just go explore on a walk. Like I think that's what's so cool about this style of music is I felt we were cracking the code to a degree when it was kind of like somewhere between like the way forward and the circadian era where like people were, coming to merch or coming to VIP and saying like, you know, I'm not even a musician. I love to game to your stuff. I'm not, I don't play an instrument myself, but I'd love to, uh, study or stream it or whatever, like it's cool. Like that makes a lot of sense. Because to me, it's not a deliberate intention, but it's a
Added bonus.
yeah, it's cool. And then I should also say, just like a peek behind the curtain as well, like there are personnel that worked on this record with me that it'd be hard to not sound this way given their sort of their pedigree. So the most obvious tune on the record that has that aesthetic is the sort of palette cleanser at the middle. It's called Side Quest, which is very on the nose. That is I am showing my hand on that because um funny enough, like, the entire record revolves around this like sort of conceptual idea of the art of memory. Um, Memory Palace
Mm.
being a reference to this sort of
Mhm.
this technique, which is, utilized to represent, memories or complex sequences of information through like mnemonic devices, like certain ways that you remember, like picturing the inside of your head like an apartment, and where you left your keys or hung your hat is like, a sequence of information or a memory or something like that. It's a technique which I thought it was such a cool like metaphor for, the art of memory, which dovetails with like a concept that I've been referencing in sort of, previous like song titles and things like that. So for me, when we were working on that song, and the collaborator on that song is my friend Evan Marion. He's actually, people know him as a bass player first and foremost, but Evan's a overall composer and a freak when it comes to like this kind of stuff, production, video game music. He's super into video game music as well, so there's no way it wasn't going to sound like that. And Evan was playing bass for Alan Holdsworth just before Alan passed, and now he plays with uh, a sick Armenian piano player named Tigran Hamasyan that's like very much in the like jazz and fusion avant-garde sort of space. Evan and his drummer Dana have actually opened for Animals as Leaders. Like they sort of like toe the line between all these things. So we've known Evan for a while, and he gave me access to like a folder of all kinds of like stuff that he had already kind of banked, and a lot of it has this like video game aesthetic to it. So when I started working on the composition with him, I kept having in my mind like, because of the nature of the album concept, which is, rooted in the art of memory, I kept wanting to actually name the song something to do with like a checkpoint, like the idea of like saving the game in one spot and re-accessing that memory
Oh
all the time
yeah.
is like a really
Oh,
cool
I
little
like
theme to
that.
me. But we
Yeah.
couldn't find like an eloquent way to put that. So I just called it
Uh,
Sidewest because it's like the aesthetic is slightly left of center to, maybe like the way the rest of the record feels, which is like a little bit more in our wheelhouse. And then this one's like we're very much wearing it on our sleeve. Like here's like a
mhm.
bubbly, like fun, high energy video game song. So that's kind of how stuff like that came together. Also, a friend and collaborator, Jesse Zaretti, who was working at Marvel Studios when I met him, has worked for Netflix, and he's doing work for ID Games and Rockstar and all this kind of stuff. Like he worked on every single song with me to sort of like fill my blind spots and kind of like shade the gaps in. Um, on a lot of that layered aesthetic that you were talking about that makes the albums definitely stand out. And Jesse comes from that background too. I've always referenced that kind of sound a little bit, like not so much on the nose with previous material, although fans have said like, oh, this sounds like video game music, or like, oh, you must be into this soundtrack or this or whatever. And I've always kind of hinted at things like, Sega Genesis was my first console when I was a kid. I was, I'm born in 1989, so I grew up in the 90s with, the
Lots
advent
of
of,
Sonic.
yeah, oh, 100%. Like I was doing that before I was doing Mario or anything like that. So like
Hmm.
that like aesthetic and the music that was in those games and the like early
Hmm.
90s Sega aesthetic is so cool to me, and that's always going to find its way in. But I also love like the music from Final Fantasy, and
Wow.
even like Mario Kart and stuff has some crazy stuff. That's a little kitschy. It's like elevator music on steroids, but like, it's this stuff is all in there, and we've all gamed enough to like, I think a lot of our generation has gamed enough to like know how to recognize these things.
Yeah.
And that's what forms, the basis for, and where you pull from even subconsciously sometimes with some of this music. So to deliver it in a way that's like still contemporary and fits in with what we're doing is like, it's cool. It's like a fun nod to, and so many of those Japanese composers or video game composers in general, have made such incredible music. Like Periphery wear it on their sleeve.
Yeah.
Buo, the composer for Final Fantasy, over time, like, Misha and Mark and Jake have been referencing that stuff by not only doing like full on like medleys and like worship to that music but like also you can hear how that's influenced certain, just approaches that they take with riffs, arpeggios, different sounds, chord progressions, harmony in their music and stuff. So it's there.
Yeah.
And and why fight it? It's just like this is the stuff that comes out. For me, it's like a blend between like the nostalgia of video game music and
Yeah.
like my love for like early 2000s pop punk and like emo scene. And like I was going to the Warped Tour, and like
Mhm.
I kind of like transitioned from Green Day and Blink-182 and all that stuff into finding like a lot of the Fat Records bands. I found like Strung
Mhm.
Out and No Effects and Lagwagon, No Use for a Name, Bad Religion, Pennywise. Like all this stuff was like for me how I was like, oh, I've sort of found like high energy guitar music. And then when I discovered like where that transitions into modern metal, whether that was like early Avenged Sevenfold and Atreyu and things like that, I was like equal parts listening to that and like Newfound Glory at the same time. So it was like, you know what I mean? It's like that's just where I came
A big
from.
palette.
Yeah. So you have that, and then you get like, into like music from like my childhood, which would absolutely be video games and things like that.
Yeah.
And then you just like smash that all together with like being, you know, sort of enticed by the guitar and the nature of playing guitar forward music. That's sort of the recipe for, it's a hot pot filled with a lot of stuff, but that's the recipe for the intervals music really is just kind of coming from all of those places and less about being concerned with like what's hot now, what's contemporary, like
Yeah.
how do I my version of an Animals as Leaders or something like that, because we were
Right.
already going. So to me, it's like, we've done I think like 75 shows together with Tosin and Javier and Nat. And
Is
so to me, those are peers, those are friends. They're front runners. They're breaking down the doors constantly. But rather than looking at like how we can do our version of that, it's more so like how do I bring what I'm into and have it live shoulder to shoulder in that universe with them. So
yeah, yeah, with and through your own flavor. Um, yeah, I have so many every time you talk, I have like so many different questions I want to branch out on what you're saying. Um, okay, I'm gonna go back to the memory thing because I'm really into brain stuff. And I know that like with Alzheimer's, people that struggle with memory and music can bring forth memories.
yes,
I did that with my grandma with Elvis Presley. And it's
that's
just
wonderful.
it's so interesting. It's so interesting how it brings them back, Um,
Yes,
plus it's a different part of the brain and there's something like you hear a song and it'll transport you automatically to a certain time in your life or a certain event or moment. So I think
yep,
it's so cool that those are things that you guys actively think about. Plus, like if we think about classical music and how much it activates so many different parts of our brain and how it helps with study and everything, it makes sense that what you guys are doing is like a modernized version of that, and I can see how it would enlighten so many different synapses within our brain to help in video games and even walking, just like how we release endorphins walking and we start solving the world's problems. You add that extra layer of the
yep,
music to get the brain even more activated, and then
yes.
maybe you can find the answers. I don't know.
I mean, there's three references directly to everything that you just mentioned on the album. So track one is called Neurogenesis, which is the act of new neurons growing in the body, which can be stimulated by music. Neurogenesis is something that, for a long time, I think like modern, well, not modern, but sort of like medical, papers and research like pointed to like, oh, after a certain age, like the brain stops developing. And they've actually proven that this is not the case. So through the aid of things like nootropics, which is, track 4 on the record, that's a nod to that. And I was already pointing to some of those things on circadian as well. So like that dovetails there, nootropics and how that has an influence. And also neurogenesis is super tongue in cheek because the suffix Genesis means the beginning, which is track
Right.
one on the album.
Right. Oh my gosh,
So,
that's so
so
clever.
that was kind of like I have to do this kind of thing. And then you mentioned Alzheimer's, and the end of the record closes with a song called Chronophobia, which is the fear of time passing, or the fear of, losing time, or, this idea of, so I try to connect time and memory as much as I can, because I think that those things are like very interlinked. Um, and I just got an hourglass tattooed on me yesterday. So and I think that it's really important because, time is such a wormhole.
Yeah.
Time is a constant, but time's also frozen when it comes to things like memories.
Oh my God.
And you're talking about like hearing a piece of music and accessing memory. I mean, that is like, time is all bundled up. You have a snapshot frozen in time. Like that's what a memory is, isn't it? So this idea like chronophobia is like a nod towards, and I have my mom's mom is been having a really strong fight with um dementia and the degradation of memory. And um for me, like the fear of time passing, or like losing time, spending too much time on something and missing out on other things, or like, you blink and it's all gone kind of thing, is like that's so that I really wanted to kind of encapsulate that feeling. It's, the tune was just sort of speaking to me and saying like this is the one to sort of like sell that idea on. And I just, in my brain, I was like, is chronophobia a word? I didn't even know whether or not
Yeah.
that's actually a thing. And then I Googled it, of course, as you do. And that was like, of course, chronophobia, the fear of time, or the fear of time elapsing. And I was like, yeah, that's a no brainer. It's
Right.
so yeah, it's kind of all over the place in terms of like where I'm pulling some of these references from, but they all fit under this umbrella of like memory, the art of memory, and the concept of the art of memory as well. This idea about talking about, the growing of new neurons and things. Like music is just like random access memory. It's muscle memory. Muscle
Yeah.
memory in and of itself is a wormhole that's absolutely fascinating to me
Yeah.
as well, because my mom always used to say to me when I was like starting out in bands and learning all these songs and everything and writing, how do you remember anything? How do you remember anything?
Practice, practice, practice.
And coming out of the pandemic, spending less time in that headspace, the biggest fear for me was, is it still there when it came back, a year and a half after, being
Mhm.
relegated to not touring. And then we're getting ready for, the biggest, most comprehensive headliner we've done and all this new music, but I got to play old music. And like, it's not about the hands. I can get the hands there, but is the brain there?
Yeah.
So I'm always like, and that dovetails with, that like for me, like this idea, like the fear of losing time is like, the fear of like losing that ability to access those memories. So muscle memory super important, time super important, memory in general. So yeah, it's a heady concept, pun intended. I suppose there's a giant head on the front of the album cover. I guess I just kind of.
Speaking of which, and it's also made an appearance in a at least one video, maybe
Yep.
even more than one.
Yep.
Do you have a name for Mr. Robot Head?
I don't have a name, which is really funny because we immediately, as soon as I signed off on the album concept, I was so excited about it because the artist was able to encapsulate this feeling of, for whatever reason, aesthetically, I wanted to also incorporate like brutalist architecture. So,
Hmm.
funny enough, the album artist, Mihailo, is in Serbia. So he would know it better than most of us. He lives in post-Soviet Serbia, and like he absolutely has a knack for like bringing that cold concrete feeling and those like hard lines. So we were developing that sort of like, I don't want to call it a character because it's an inanimate object, it's a building, but like, we try.
It still has a
It is.
personality though.
It's humanoid, and like
Yeah.
we wanted that, so I tried to cover up some features. Like I didn't want you to see a mouth. Obviously you can see a little bit of nose. There is like ears, but like they're like almost like chimney stacks. Like I really wanted to hint at it without going too far. um but he doesn't have a name. We just knew that everyone was going to say like, oh, is that Homer Simpson, concrete Homer Simpson, or is it Bender or something like that? And we saw a ton of that in the comments right away.
Bender.
My favorite comment so far, though, that I think wins, and I haven't seen a better one since, is C3PO off of Percocet. That's my favorite the most unhinged yeah, it's crazy. I was like, yeah, he has that vibe for sure. So now everyone has to go look at the album cover. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to go
pretty
revisit. I'm
pretty
gonna have to go
pretty
revisit
nuts.
and watch some Star Wars.
Pretty nuts. And yeah, we were able to actually use the 3D OBJ, which is the 3D file that the artist created for the album cover, and utilize that in the Neurogenesis music video. Which, funny enough, we made it with a good friend from St. Louis. His name's Sam Beck, and flew him to Montreal. We got a film studio there to make the video, and the treatment initially was to have us performing in sort of this like sort of nondescript infinity room and having like a lot of the cutscenes be the sort of like undulating neuromass stuff as just, that was kind of like the initial treatment was just like performance based with some cool graphics. And they had a like a pump truck in the space, and he got up, I don't know, 12, 15 feet or something in the air to get this really high shot. And he yells at me from the top of it like, "Oh, I'm gonna put you in the head." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "I'm just visualizing like the concrete circular eye, and I want to see like into it and have you guys playing inside it." And I was like, "Is that possible? Like, are we able to do that?" And he goes, "Is the head 3D on the album cover?" And I said, "Yeah, the guy made it in 3D." And he's like, "Yeah, it's a done deal." So we actually got the actual head from the album cover. Sam remapped it to be able to utilize it in the music video, and it was, beyond my, wildest sort of intention with the music video is we wound up playing inside the head from the album cover, which is really fun. And you mentioned, oh, it might appear in some of the other visualizers and stuff. It absolutely is. It's an Easter egg and multiple. You can see it sitting on in the in the nootropic visualizer. The idea is it sort of takes place in like almost like, like a childhood bedroom type situation with an
Oh
old
yeah.
school computer. And the bookshelf has like a model of the head sitting in the bookshelf. And then in the circuit bender one, we kind of put a bow on everything and recapped like all the different vibes. And we were able to utilize that as well in a couple different ways. That visualizer is like our team's really into like on tour plays a lot of Mario Kart. So the fact that
Just
Sam was
like the
able to
track
make
one.
yeah, it looked like kind of like our take on like Rainbow Road, and he was able to
Yep.
like have the car like, wind right into the eye of the head and do all that stuff. So pretty it was more than I bargained for in terms of what we were able to accomplish visually. And shout out to, all these guys that helped, carry the vision forward, because for me it's just like kooky ideas. I just sit in this room and what
See what you
what
can
would
do
be what
with
would be cool, man, and everyone's really been rising to the occasion. So, and it takes a village to do this stuff. And yeah, just like huge shout out to all those guys for that. It's like we really got to sell the idea because I was concerned that we weren't going to be able to convey this in a way that, I mean, it takes a long time to talk about these things, of course. It's hard to sort of like give the elevator pitch on what it's all about very quickly. So maybe that's a flaw,
it.
but
No,
it's
you
something
give
to
a
talk
lot of
about.
really cool details and information. I definitely don't think it's a flaw. It's things that people want to know, you know.
Cool.
I
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I think that might be missing sometimes in contemporary instrumental music. I
Hmm.
think that because there isn't that added sort of dimension of explicitly telling you what to think about or how to feel, what the song is about,
Hmm.
from a lyrical standpoint, I think that it's cool to like have more there. And
Hmm.
for me, it justifies the syntax of deciding on song titles and the overall album
Oh,
concept stuff because I don't feel very like I don't know. I don't feel very like I'm selling my ideas with conviction if there isn't like a really like honest and wholehearted reason for why I arrived at something. And I
hmm.
think that that's due to the lack of like having the lyric sheet, because if we were doing more traditional music or I was the vocalist or writing music or whatever, we could have that discussion about like what particular lines mean and what the song means. But I don't see it a lot in contemporary instrumental music. And maybe that's not necessary. Maybe that's not why some fans are into this kind of thing. And that's fine because you can take it surface level and just like have a listen and walk away from it. That's all good. But for those that want the lore, that want, to peek behind the curtain, like I always, even just for myself, like this stuff has to be back there, you
Right.
know, because then it lets me put a bow on every single one of these pieces and say, this is why I wrote it, or this is, maybe not necessarily why I wrote it, but this is the meaning that I've derived from and to it. So yeah.
Right. Well, and it gives people extra, I mean, the layers of the music is one thing, and you can listen to the album over and over again and hear something different, each time you listen, which is really cool. But then
For
you
sure.
have the added visuals onto it as well, which make it like a whole other listening experience, and that's really cool.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm glad that's coming across on this one. Tried to hint at that a little bit with Circadian. Weren't able to go as hard with some of the content to really kind of sell that idea. Like the illusions are there.
Mhm.
We can draw inference from the song titles. I can tell you what I'm thinking about for each individual one and how I got there. Um, you mentioned like endorphins and these types of things. And on this new record, I've named a song Nootropic, which is just an outright on the nose hit on that. But, there are two songs on Circadian that are named like 5-HTP is the opener, and then a melody in that song, a motif is referenced again later in a track called Dose, which is dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. 5-HTP being the molecular precursor to serotonin in the body upstream from serotonin. So it's cool because it's like you get a foreshadow and a hint, which is like the precursor, and then you get the melody again later in the record, and they're linked by their song titles as well. So for those that don't know, I have been doing this. I'm just trying. It's always hard to like sell and talk about this stuff. I don't always get the medium to do it. I've often been tempted to maybe write some sort of dissertation,
Yeah, you
something
should.
like that, and maybe I will.
Yeah.
But it's cool that like have a platform like this to come on and talk to someone who gets it, and hopefully others can take away, like that there is like a calculated train of thought that's going on here when it comes to that stuff. So
Well, and really, even to add to all of that, I think it's important that people know about the memory thing and know about neuroplasticity, because a lot of people are just like, oh, that's just how I am. So, that's just
no,
how I always be. And it's like, no, you can actually change the way you think. You can change you can um do these incredible things that so many people don't know about because it's not
through
something we talk about.
multiple yeah through multiple
Yeah,
modalities, whether it's cold exposure, heat
yeah,
exposure, nootropics, particularly like lion's mane mushroom, which is in the sort of like more,
tea and
not the fancy and fun ones that I am often
stuff.
hinting
The
to
stuff
at
that
times
they
as
put in the
well.
tea, right?
Yeah, it's more so, like these are things you can go to your local grocer probably and find. It looks like that big white fluffy. In fact, it has that, I forget what it's called, where you have that like sort of like signature in nature of for like what a particular food does. For example, like walnuts look like a brain from the top down.
Right,
They're healthy for brain health. Beets are healthy for the vascular system. They're blood red.
right.
um so the lion's mane
Potency.
mushroom is this puffy white nervy looking, they literally look like neurons. That's exactly, if you Google what a neuron looks like, and its function in the body is to actually encourage the regrowth and the resheathing of neurons in this coating that helps to keep them protected and make synapses fire more efficiently, which is how we continue to access memory for longer. It is directly correlated to the reversal of Alzheimer's. Like
Right,
these things are possible.
right.
Um,
I
so
didn't know. I knew lion's mane was good for your brain, but I didn't know the specifics of all that. So that's really interesting.
yeah, absolutely. It plays a role in neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, the regrowth of, obviously has to be taken over time and in a healthy diet and someone who's
Right,
active and, but for me, like when I, have utilized these things, and whether it's just to use an example, like got some repetitive stress injuries from being a guitar player my whole life and constantly being in a chair. And, we've all got messed up shoulders and low back and all that stuff. And, I found that when I'm more on my game with the supplement regimen, and bringing things like that in, that the body will hold posture better.
Mm.
He says as he sits like a pretzel. You know,
Drink your
you
lion's
know,
mane.
yeah, or like, whether it's physio and these types of things that like I found, or to actually link it to something that maybe matters more for the people who are listening, and the retention of muscle memory,
Yeah.
learning patterns, being able to access these things quicker, being able to hone in and dial the brain and the hands in together quicker. This stuff absolutely matters. And can make, you can just be baseline healthy, or you can go further, which is, the idea of the nootropic thing. Also, it's a bit of an inside joke as well, because like I'll, go to a Whole Foods on tour and buy some Alpha Brain and put it in my cupboard in the bus or whatever, and my front of house slash tour manager Chase will always be like, "Oh, you taking your Rogan Tuft? You take, it's like weird stuff like that." I'm like, they're always, it's an ongoing thing in our camp, but everybody understands the benefits of these things, and I've been trying to kind of tuck that into the narrative for a while. Like, I'm just fascinated by that stuff, so why not like bring that in? It's
You
cool.
should bring it into marketing and branding, like because they do make it into coffees and teas and stuff. You should.
Intervals branded nootropics. I don't know how I'm gonna get FDA approved for this, but we're gonna figure it out. Let's go.
Yeah, no, it's not a bad idea. You know the science behind it. I mean, everybody knows the science behind it. And not everybody, but everybody that actually looks for the information knows the science behind it because there is a science behind it. It's not just a fad, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone who works at Silo or any of these other companies is listening to this interview, feel free to just send stuff. I'll
There you
take,
go.
yeah, well, all day. I'll post it on my stuff. I'm down. If you want to contribute to the creation of new intervals music, brain me up. Let's go.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I could talk all day about this. I love this kind of stuff.
Nice.
I'm a therapist and I use a lot of neuroplasticity in my sessions because
There you go.
yeah, because people will I'm just depressed and I'm like, okay, absolutely you are depressed. Let's work on like changing those brain patterns to where you maybe won't be. Oh
That's
no, I'm
it.
just always going to be depressed. And I'm like, but I'm telling you, there's maybe a chance here that
Yeah, and it's not always the like low hanging fruit of the like, just go see your doctor and just take this random pharmaceutical or something like that. There are things that you can absolutely do through therapeutic modalities, things like that. I remember, I don't know who lays claim to the original quote, but um it's on the tip of my tongue. I won't be able to reference it quick enough. There, I probably need to take something.
all right.
Speaking of memory, uh, no, the book is called The Divided Mind, and it's about psychosomatic, um, uh, disorder, I suppose, and sort of like debunking this idea that, you know, um, that we can't just experience like, things that are just in our head, like pain in the body stemming from memory, these types of
Yeah.
things. And the quote that I'm trying to access here is, "What wires together fires together," which I'm sure you've heard before.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So like
I like that.
that's like, talking about like those ruts, memories, like these thought patterns are derived from like the path of least resistance in the brain, like whether it's quickly accessing a traumatic memory and then the response that follows, or these types of things. Like, I've always like remembered that like we can actively change those things through whether it's like CBT or these types of
Mhm.
things, like being able to kind of, use tricks to get around it, because the brain, whether it's, poor postures that we just go to right away because they're easier for the body, or these thoughts that we have right away. Somebody might tell you something that's like not that emotional or too dramatic, but you have like this really explicit response to it right away.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody right next to you would feel differently about what they were just told. That's
Right.
because it's not the information or the content, it's how we react and perceive based on prior experience, right? So,
Absolutely.
and that's
Yeah.
exactly what that is. That's what wires together fires together. And you can flip those words as well, because what fires together wires
Right.
as well.
Absolutely.
That's the whole idea, right? So yeah, it's cool that this interview divulged into that. Like, there's a
Yes.
lot of people that are like, wow, that took a turn, but it is
I,
is
it's
what the record
important
is
stuff
about,
though.
and it's
Yeah,
very
exactly.
fascinating. Very
Yeah,
fascinating.
and it's an important topic. In the therapy land, we have a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and that's talking about how the body holds on to trauma and how we have those reactions or whatever to things that we don't necessarily recognize or that is being stored there. But one more quick thing, the book that helped me a lot, if you're interested in extra information on the same subject, is it's called Buddha's Brain. It's a neuroscience book, but it's written very, like, you don't have to know, you obviously already know a lot about it, but you don't have to know anything about
Cool.
neuroplasticity or anything, and he does a fantastic job of explaining it and how to be able to do it. I
Nice.
beat
That's cool.
a lot of things with it. It really turned my whole
I'm
life
I'm
around.
gonna check it out. And just to be my own Jamie on the pod here, The Divided Mind by John E. Sarno
I've heard of
is
that one, but I'm surprised I don't have it with as many
yep.
freaking books as I have.
You,
I'm gonna look it up real quick. The
you
Divided
want
Mind.
yeah, by John E. Sarno. You want that one for sure.
Okay,
Uh,
cool.
yeah. Yeah,
Yay.
that's no, that stuff is fascinating. And if there's any musicians out there that are listening to this and going, what is this? Does this matter? Yes, it matters.
It
It matters.
so matters.
Your brain is what controls your damn hands. It definitely
It's
matters.
matters in all aspects of life, but definitely in music, absolutely. And there's a reason
Sure.
why intervals is paving more ways in the music world, and it's connecting with more people, and that's probably a big part of it.
I appreciate that. The next steps are now to get weird and change some stuff up. I got some ideas, but you
Get
know,
weird. I love it.
that's for future stuff. But yeah, no,
I'm
it's
stoked.
cool. It's cool, and I'm glad to be able to open up a dialogue about those types of things through you know through it's orbiting around instrumental music. Very interesting that there's so much to talk about, but I guess we're doing it because that's exactly what I wanted to deliver from a message standpoint with this is to be able to maybe spur these thoughts in people who don't think about it and to
Mhm.
kind of like go down that rabbit hole and derive what you want from it, but also like there's a lot of concrete stuff, another album pun, there you go, that we can have some cool conversations about. So yeah, I'm always down to nerd out on stuff like that.
Same.
Cool.
Um, I so much appreciate you taking this time with me. It's been
Sure.
so fun diving into your brain. Next time you guys come this way, I absolutely will not be out of
Do
town.
it.
We'll be catching it.
Let's
And
do
I'm
it.
really excited to talk to you in the future about what this weird stuff is going to be, because Mr. Bungle's one of my favorite bands. I'm all about the weird.
Oh, I don't know. I
Bring
don't know if
it.
it's Mr. Bungle weird, but it's time to try some new things for sure. So, but also keeping an eye on the prize as well because been a lot of great work that's happened over the last decade, and I'm very content with where we sit currently. Um, but there's a lot of music in the catalog, and I got a lot more coming. So, just want to like have some fun with some stuff, and first and foremost, though, I'm gonna play a bunch of these new songs across some various opportunities that we have between now and the end of the year. Really exciting tour schedule kicking up towards the end of this year and onwards through 2025. So not much that I can unveil just yet. We're about to announce this clinic run in Korea, China, Malaysia, Thailand, and Taiwan for July, which is cool. Traveling without the band, that's music store appearances and some you know large scale performances and things like that. But it's myself and fellow guitarist, actually fellow Canadian guitarist Nick Johnston, and we're going on behalf of Schecter, which is really cool. And then we're going to get into all the really fun touring stuff that comes later. So, but yeah, I hope if people made it this far, that's sick. I'm stoked on that.
Hey,
So,
I've enjoyed myself. So.
me too. No, it's cool. It's actually really fun to illuminate some of that stuff. We got further on some of those concepts that I've been able to discuss in previous publicity so far throughout the campaign and stuff. It's always cool when somebody gets it and we can just kind of chop it up about that. So hopefully people found that interesting. I'm definitely stoked on it. So
Yes, yeah, same. Awesome.
nice.
Yeah, it's hard to find people that are open to that subject or understand the subject enough to be able to discuss it. So I very much enjoyed myself as well.
Nice, that
I
rocks.
usually get the like deer in the headlights like when I start talking about it. I'm like, please just stick with me. I swear it's important.
No, it's cool. This stuff matters, and
It does.
like music doesn't have to be about she left me or I'm sad or like, curse this, you know, political thing or this religious thing or whatever. It doesn't have to be about any of that stuff. It
Right.
really doesn't. And that's what's so cool. We got to travel around the world a lot thus far doing this, and especially in a lot of these international places where we don't even share a common language. Funny enough,
Right.
funny enough, we actually do. So,
Yo, absolutely. Music
you know,
is the one language that we all understand. And I
yeah.
think that that's such a beautiful thing.
That's the best. It truly is
Yeah.
the best and keeps us, we're pretty liquid in that sense that, even just within the North American market, being able to bounce between just in the last year, within 1 year's time, we went from supporting Spirit Box to, playing at a casino in Cherokee, North Carolina with Mammoth WVH to people that have definitely never heard of intervals before. So, we can do it all,
So
which is fun. And I'm
awesome.
excited to try, to go as far in different directions as we can. I think that that's what's
Yeah,
really, really exciting about it. So
I agree. I agree. I'm excited to see what you guys do too.
awesome. Thank you very much.
For sure. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Appreciate it. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.